council adhered to, that dischargers should always know where they are discharging to, regardless of kind of the burden that that might impose. To touch on further aspects of monitoring real quick, we would ask that with the well discharges and turbidity, that be strengthened. We don't believe that visual monitoring that's setting up something that pretty much is not possible to have someone visually look for turbidity. We don't believe that's possible to that threshold. And finally, we ask that the authority of the executive officer on the regional in the regions be restored to require additional monitoring. As we've seen today, the diversity of water purveyors combined with the diversity of California's hydrological conditions really necessitates that the executive officer have discretion to add more monitoring requirements. I'm thinking of maybe small streams where copper is an issue, or just the nuances expressed kind of throughout California. And while streamlining is important, we don't want to forget that it's a very diverse and complicated state, and we need to have flexibility where it is possible. So with those final remarks, thank you very much, and that is all.
I'm sorry, help me understand. You're concerned that the water bodies or receiving waters to which these discharges are being made are not being identified? I thought that was part of the permit.
Well, it is, but with certain tributaries and small streams, it's no longer, that requirement has been rolled back. I'm going to lean on staff for a little help and explanation on that point.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Tam, I didn't catch what your comment was.
I was trying to understand his concerns about what he perceived to be a relaxation of the requirements to identify receiving water bodies.
Okay. The relaxation is through the application process, where the previous draft required that the applicant identify all their receiving water bodies. This final draft only requires that they identify either the named ones, the named water bodies, or the major water bodies downstream. They do not need to identify the small tributaries to those water bodies.
And was that as a result of your consideration of comments on cost?
Yes, the comments on the cost of how much it would cost to get maps out, identify the names, present it into a format that is suitable for the application, and so forth.
And your concern is that some of the tributaries and smaller water bodies that are receiving discharges would somehow be impacted?
Correct. We prefer the original requirement where all streams, all receiving waters will be named, and all discharges everywhere where the discharges are occurring will be properly documented and identified.
And in making the change, what was staff's conclusions with respect to the cost to associate it with your initial recommendation?
Our conclusion was, especially one of the smaller districts showed us a map of all the tributaries that go through their service area and all the unnamed tributaries. And the conclusion was that it would probably cost a lot of resources on their behalf to identify all those small little tributaries, especially in the more foothill communities and so forth. Another basis is that in the LA area or the Southern California area, when you have lots of those natural water bodies which are now put into man-made culverts, they don't have a name, where are they on the map, how do you identify them? We didn't believe the amount of resources going into that brought forth valuable information at the time of the application.
And after all, these are very, very low threat discharges. So I would concur. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
And also,
I would like to add too
go
that
ahead.
actually we're asking them to do monitoring for scenarios where their effluent is not in compliance. So we will be asking them to monitor the receiving waters. So at that time, they should identify if there are any receiving waters that are being impacted.
Yeah, and also by just getting the named water bodies, you're getting the tributaries to those water bodies. So there is some information. Hey, real quickly, before, sorry to interrupt, sir. The turbidity question, there's been some confusion around that. In your presentation, you noted it was really the numeric threshold, the action level was limited to the groundwater well development and discharges, not necessarily to the sedimentation that can occur when a trench gets eroded by 150 psi of pressure, that type of BMP. And so for the turbidity monitoring, is it required for, in the street kind of thing with drinking water system maintenance, unplanned and planned, or groundwater well development, or is it and? Could you clarify when numeric turbidity limits apply and when it's a visual?
Yes, the numeric BMP threshold of 100 turbidity units applies for supply well development and rehabilitation operations. And that's 100 NTU. It's a threshold in which if the monitoring shows you go above 100 NTU, you need to enhance your BMPs until you get below it. Now, when we were looking at how to address the cost on turbidity meters, we kind of swung from one end to the other, and we were looking at visual estimates. And we applied visual estimates to both that numeric threshold of 100 for well operations and to the annual monitoring, which is for representative. To kind of tighten that up a little bit, there is the option that we keep the visual estimate only to the annual representative monitoring. That is when you have these clean water discharges flushing down debris through the streets and so forth. And if we choose to add metering back, we add it to the well development and rehab operations.
Thank you.
That's good. We will discuss that further later. Okay, thank you.
Dana, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the board. My name is Dana Strawn. I'm with the El Dorado Irrigation District. I'm the Drinking Water Operations Manager. I'd like to take this time to thank staff and the board's leadership in development of this this permit, and as it proceeds, it's been a very great opportunity to be able to comment and grow this into a permit that we can all live with. My comments are very short. Most everything has been discussed by other purveyors out here, and I just wanted to stress one more time about the inclusion of de minimis use. We don't wish to have any unintended consequences happen when we have small usage, small volumes of water that get in, that we have to release that's not chlorinated, that may get into the environment. Taking into worker safety, taking into just the small amount that comes out, either instrumentation or when we flush for samples to collect. But we'd like to have that revisited and included for some de minimis use. And the clarity of the intent, I think, would do so. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair Spivey Weber and board members and staff. And LADWP also wants to commend staff for this draft. They've made a lot of changes, and we very much appreciate what they've done. We just have a few comments for you from experience, and we want to make this a workable permit because, as Tam pointed out, we don't want any third-party lawsuits, and being that we're very experienced in that, we want to be able to comply, and we're going to start with the permit compliance on page 17, that paragraph there, Diana. We talk about indirect discharges because in LADWP, most of our discharges are within the city of Los Angeles, and we are indirect to receiving water bodies. We go through miles and miles of underground MS4s. And it talks here about noncompliance with receiving water bodies, and that we have to make information made available to the water boards. And we've had experience with this with our infamous Sunset water main break, where we were issued a 13267 letter. And so it's sort of a precursor to enforcement. So we're already guilty, with this paragraph. So then that takes me to the emergency, post-notification of emergency discharges and being non-compliant. And you're asking for 24 hours of any emergency discharge. And I've been on call with the districts for a weekend, and where I asked them, call me on every single leak, every single discharge break that you've had, and I did not get 1 hour of sleep. I mean, I can tell you that I was up every single hour when I've got